Hi not board gamers, and welcome back to Not Board Gaming. I'm your host, I'm Mark. Now in today's episode we're going to be reviewing a game which comes to Kickstarter in September 2020, and that game is Merchants of Infinity, designed by Andrew Prowse. Now Merchants of Infinity defines itself as a space-bound worker placement, resource management, hand management, set collection, auctioning game. And, you know, there's quite a lot going on there. In reality, it really is a kind of worker placement game. You're going to place your trader meeples in this wonderfully looking, wonderful design spaceport called Mandelbrot to collect some resources and maybe do contracts or ship orders and try to get the most points possible. So I do want to say up front that this is a review copy provided to me by Andrew Prowse. With it still being in development, the components aren't final and are subject to change. And of course, even though it's a review copy, that will not affect how I feel about the game itself. Merchants of Infinity was designed as a 2 to 5 player game, but as Andrew was going through the development process, people would approach him about a solo version of the game. So Andrew has created a solo set of rules for Merchants of Infinity. Now, you know, in the instruction manual that he's written, it's a very good looking instruction manual. Andrew does admit that these are his first set of solo rules that he's ever designed. So we'll see as we go through this review as to whether the solo mode actually works in Merchants of Infinity by Andrew Prowse. Looking at this prototype version and the components and the quality of the artwork, you would be forgiven for thinking this is a big release game, because, you know, the amount of thought and the amount of detail that's gone into some of these cards is absolutely fantastic. The artwork on each and every card doesn't feel necessarily perfunctory. It feels like, you know, it's really indicative of the theme. You've got the wonderful looking main board with Mandelbrot in the middle and all the associated things around it, and it's not laid out in a particularly clunky way. It makes sense when you start playing the game. And of course, in a stroke of genius, you have these wonderful multicoloured meeples, which are just great. The neon colours really speak into the kind of the vibrancy of the game. And if we look at the box art for the game as well, again, it just feels a little bit like, you know, it's a big company that's doing this, and it's not. Obviously, it's just it's Andrew that's doing this, and Rogue Artist Creations. And I do think that what they've done is absolutely fantastically captured and kind of a unique spirit and a unique style, and it really, really works for the style of the game. However, you know, the artwork isn't everything. Let's go into the gameplay, how you set the game up for a solo game, how the solo game plays, and what my thoughts are on the solo game. So Merchants of Infinity takes place over 6 rounds, and over those 6 rounds you will try and manipulate the board in the best way possible, fighting against the AI in the solo game and the other blocking mechanism that's in the game to try and get the most amount of platinum possible. You see, because platinum is the resource which drives the game, and everything is worth an element of platinum in the game. So the board is laid out really thematically very, very nicely. In the middle of the board, you've got the space station. That's Mandelbrot itself. And in Mandelbrot, you've got various resource kind of spaces in there. And that's where you will place a worker meeple to claim one of those resources. In a quite clever way, these resources are worth different values as the game progresses, because up at the top, you've got a market disc and a market dial. And this will turn and it will dictate what each and every resource is worth, and it will change throughout the game. Those resources are kind of the key thing behind the game as well. They drive a lot of the functions in the game, because another thing you can do is place a worker meeple to claim a ship order. And when you claim a ship order, to fulfill that ship order, you know, on this particular one, you need to have 3 different types of resources. So if you place the worker meeple on one of the resource areas, and at the end of the round, you will then place it on this card, and those worker meeples will stay there until you fulfill that ship order. So that's kind of a neat little mechanism there. It means that you can absolutely plan to get fulfill some of these big value ship orders, but it may well mean mean that you're going to be without a meeple or two for a round or two. There are other spaces as well, so as I say, you can go to the vortex bar, and here there are kind of bounties here, and if you've got a meeple in a resource area, you don't have to claim the resource, but in a resource area that dictates to one of these symbols on top of one of these cards, that means you fulfill that, and you will get 6 platinum there for that particular card. So everything you do drives you getting an amount of platinum. Obviously, the resources that you put on there at the end of your round, you'll reclaim those. You will reclaim the value of those resources depending on what meeples you've got on there, and that's good because you're not actually collecting tiny little cubes of resources. All you're doing is collecting the value of those resources. Same with the ship orders. If you fulfill a ship order, you'll get the resource value there. And same with these cards as well. I say if you fulfill them, you'll get the resource value that's on those cards. There are a couple of other areas as well. There's an auction where you can bid to get more resources or get an increase of value of resources. There's, as I mentioned, there's the market wheel, which does turn each and every round. And up in the top left, you've got station spaces, and these are kind of one-time use spaces, and they'll give you some additional bonuses. So maybe you want to put it on the last one. It says ship orders pay +5. So if I would have fulfilled this ship order and I've got a meeple on that station space, I would have increased my ship order fulfillment by +5. So that would have given me 30 for there as well. In the solo game, there's a couple of spaces that you don't use. You're not going to use the Nova spaces, which are up on the top right. And those are more for the multiplayer, or definitely for the multiplayer, because they involve some kind of backstabbing mechanisms as well, which, you know, unfortunately, a solo game, really difficult to implement in a solo game, so I can understand why Andrew's left those spaces out of there. And there's also one which is School of Thought, which gives you an additional worker meeple to place if you claim that space. But again, you don't really need that with the solo game and how the AI works. Okay, and there's also the fractal mirror, which is these cards up in the top of the board here. And what these do is they change the state of play each and every round. So at the beginning of each round, you're going to draw a new fractal mirror card. So here we go. This one says, in this world, ship orders score just 10. So that means for this round, if you were to complete a ship order, irrespective of what that says on there, you would get a maximum of 10. Or maybe there's this card here which says this world has no jewels. That means for this round you cannot get any jewels. So you would take the blanking disc that comes with it and you would put it over the jewels space, and that means that you can't place any of your meeples there. So that can interrupt your flow of trying to get resources. And that's quite a natty little way of changing the game state each and every round. But that's me purposefully putting the cart before the horse. You see, before you take your first go on the main board, in the main game and in the solo game as well, is you're going to play a small mini game, because each and every player will get 5 of these cogs cards. And essentially what this is almost a bidding system, a secret bidding system, where you will try to get the highest number possible. And each of these cogs cards, so maybe, you know, we'll look at this one, that will give me +2, so that means that card is worth 2. And maybe I play that one, which zeros another player's score. And what you're doing in the multiplayer game is each and every person's got 5 cards, and you're going to secretly play which cards you want, because the person who gets the highest number of cogs gets to go first, therefore gets the lion's share of the spaces they want to choose. So, you know, I could zero another player's card, and then I could play this card, which gives me a +2, and that would mean that one of the other players, if it was multiplayer, would have a 0 on there, and I would have a 2, and I stand a better chance of going first. In the solo game, it's not quite the same, you see, because you're playing against an AI, there's no bidding system there. So what Andrew's done for the solo cogs game is you will still get your 5 cards, and in round 1, the AI will get a score of 1, and you have to beat a score of 1. Round 2, he will have a score of 2, or the AI will have a score of 2, so therefore you have to beat a score of 2, and so on through the 6 rounds of the game. You know, in the early rounds, it's quite easy to go first, but once you start using up some of these key cards, that means in some of the later rounds, you actually have to start using maybe 2 or 3 of them to score above 4, 5, and 6. And if you do that, that's okay, but you only get 1 card back each and every round. And that, you know what, it's a neat little mini game, which I think will work fantastically well in the multiplayer game. And it's okay as a mild diversion in the solo game to kind of give you that that little competition about who goes first. It's just, unfortunately, in the initial phases, you're always going to go first. So the solo game, like the main game, consists of 6 rounds. And in each of those 6 rounds, you will place all 6 of your worker meeple if you've got them all available, as I mentioned earlier, if you've got some kind of carrying over from one round to another, then it's highly likely that you may not have 6 available as you're trying to fulfill a ship order. So you will place a meeple, your AI will place a meeple, and then you're going to place a blocking meeple. So let's come on to the blocking meeple first. What's going to happen here is, at the market, you're going to have this little wheel here, and you can see it's got numbers all the way around it, 1, 2, 10. And depending on what you've done and what the market phases are, all I do is I follow those numbers on there. You roll a d10, and that's come up with a number 2. If I look at 2 on here, that gives me the pet symbol there, so I will place a blocking meeple on that pet symbol. And why? Why do we place a blocking meeple? Because there are only 3 meeples allowed on any one resource at any one time, and therefore it's entirely feasible that, you know, your AI's gone on there and maybe a blocking meeple's gone on there, or 2 blocking meeples are on there, and you need that resource, and the AI or the blocking mechanism has stopped you from getting that resource because there are already 3 meeples on there. So the blocking mechanism comes at the end of each turn. So why am I mentioning it now? Well, pretty much like a lot of things that happen in Merchants of Infinity, is you have to look at what's going to happen a little bit down the road and then try and incorporate your game into that. So it made a better flow for me to talk about the blocking mechanism now rather than at the end, because you need to know about these spaces. So then you're probably going to take your turn, or the AI is going to take their turn. And let's face it, if you're taking your turn, you know the score. You're going to try and maximize the amount of platinum you can get, and be that from getting some meeples on the resource that's worth 10 that particular round, or fulfilling a ship order, or completing these vortex cards, these contract cards, whatever it is that is going to try and get you the maximum amount of points. Maybe use a station space. And of course, in a multiplayer game, you would incorporate some blocking in there as well, or you would try and outwit your opponents, maybe have a look at what they're trying to get and stop them from getting it. Obviously, in a solo game, that doesn't really happen. So I'm going to stress again that the game was designed for 2 to 5 players. And Andrew, after receiving requests from the solo community, incorporated a solo mode. And what he's done here in his first solo mode is create something that works pretty good. You see, there are a number of deterministic actions that will happen each and every turn depending on what's gone on before it. So for its very first turn each round, the AI will try to get the most expensive ship order that's available. So that's if there's a 35, a 30 or a 20 point ship order that's available. Then if it's complete, once it's got that, what it will do on the subsequent kind of meeples, or traders as they're called in the game that it tries to play, it will either try to fulfill those orders, or it will get a vortex card, or which is the contracts card, or it will try to get the most expensive resource. Look, there are a number of ways, depending on what it's done before and what it's created on the board, that the AI will then try and work in the most advantageous way possible to it. So not necessarily blocking you, but trying to fulfill the game in such a way that grants it the most amount of platinum possible. And it works. And, you know, you will have these really kind of challenging games where you may start storming ahead of the AI, but by the time you get to the kind of 4th, 5th, well, maybe in the 6th round, then the AI is coming back. And sometimes, you know, you can win or lose a game based on the last round, based on what you should have done and what the AI has done throughout their term. So it does work. It kind of creates a nice solo challenge from a game which is clearly designed for more than one person. So yeah, it absolutely works. Kind of. And this is absolutely nothing with what Andrew's done with the set of rules here, because I think for a first set of solo rules, for any set of solo rules, the amount of thought that's gone in behind this is absolutely fantastic. This decision tree mechanism, you know, if X plus Y equals then this happens, or if it equals something else, then that happens, makes for a really interesting set of rules. There's a lot of thought gone into this in terms of how Andrew links that back into the AI kind of racking up as many points as possible. But at its heart, it feels like a system that was designed to fit into a game which is obviously going to really shine with more than one player. See, by using this decision tree process, you're effectively mapping out what is going to happen each and every round with each and every meeple. And it becomes, after you've played a few games, it becomes kind of easy to block what is going to happen to your advantage. So there are still some mild surprises that are going to happen, but once you get to know the kind of DNA of the AI and how it works, the challenge starts to lessen and lessen, and the more games you play, the more solvable it becomes. I'm not going to say that you're going to beat it in each and every turn, in each and every game, but there will become a point where there is no solo challenge there for you, because there's only so much randomness that's involved in the game. It's a game that really absolutely will shine depending on the independent actions of other players, and it's good where it kind of works with the AI to teach you the mechanisms of the game and provide you with a decent early stage challenge. But as you progress and play more and more games, that challenge is going to lessen and lessen. Which then brings another part about the solo game, is that over 6 rounds and placing 6 meeples, that is 36 actions that you're going to take. 36 actions that the AI is going to take, and 36 blocking actions that are going to take. By the time you get to kind of round 5 and 6, the fatigue is starting to set in a little bit. So in the early games, you'll get that excitement of where you are almost rubber banding between you and the AI in terms of your score. As you play a little bit more and more, those later stages just become a little bit, not tedious and not a drag, but just a little bit. The game outstays its welcome just a little bit as a solo game. I think maybe it could have been condensed down into 4 rounds, and then you'd have a tighter solo experience. So the cracks kind of start to appear in the solo game. It's not a bad solo game, don't get me wrong. There are just things there that prevent it being a total challenge. And maybe the system would excel more with an element of randomness in there. So like cards inside that kind of work off the AI's position on the board, but are more random. So following this set of kind of rules and this decision tree, but randomizing it even further by cards, may make the game a little bit more challenging for the solo player. And the overall game is pretty good. You know, it's a worker placement game. It is a mild market manipulation game. There is a bit of kind of hand management, set collection, all the stuff that is mentioned in the blurb is there. But at its heart, it's a worker placement game where you're collecting resources. So if you played a Stonemaier game, you played a version of this game, and it feels relatively thematic, but like all of these games, it's very difficult to actually drive a lot of theme into them. So it doesn't necessarily do anything brand new, but what it does do, it seemingly does very, very well. So let's go through the final thoughts on Merchants of Infinity by Andrew Proust. Look, I think you can tell that I like the game. I do like the game. I would like to play this game with more people. It's a review copy. It's going to be going on to another reviewer after I finish with it. But at some point in the future, when I get another copy, I will take it to my gaming group. And I think you'll have this real kind of good backstabbing mechanism that's working in place. The market manipulation will work. The game will open up more. But we're not here about the multiplayer game. We're here about the solo game. And I think that whilst it's good, and whilst in the early games it provides a decent enough challenge, I do think that as a purely solo experience, once you've played it a few times, as I mentioned, it kind of outstays its welcome just a little bit, and you then start to get into the areas where it may become solvable, which starts to loosen the challenge for you. So it's a good game. I like the game, and I like what Andrew's done with the solo mode. There's potentially more development that could be done there. I would recommend the game if you're getting it multiplayer and you like the theme and you like these wonderful brightly coloured meeples and you like the fact that, whilst not necessarily rewriting a genre by any stretch of the imagination, it does what it does very, very well. As a solo experience, and if you're purely getting this for solo, it's very difficult for me to recommend this for a pure solo player. If you're getting it and you're going to play it with other people and occasionally play solo, then absolutely you're going to have a good experience. But in terms of a pure solo experience, yeah, it doesn't quite hit it. The challenge is just not deep enough for a solo player. And there we go. That's my review of Merchants of Infinity by Andrew Prowse and Rogue Artist Creations. Look, as a multiplayer game, it's got real legs and real potential. As a solo game, it doesn't quite hit the mark for the reasons that I stated in the review. But do if you're going to play it with other people, then do check out the Kickstarter, which launches a little bit later on in the year, and back the project, because I think if you're playing it with other people, you're going to have a whale of a time. So thank you very much for watching this review. My name's Mark. This is Not Board Gaming. Once again, thank you very much for joining me on this journey through Merchants of Infinity. Please remember to like and subscribe to the channel, check out our other videos, and one final thought: if you can't find anybody else to play with, there's nothing wrong with playing with yourselves. Until next time, bye bye.